So I won't. Just wanted to turn this over. If there's anybody interested in other talks, please share that with me or Dan. We're open for suggestions, so please do that. At this point, I'm going to turn it to where did he go? Sandy. Sandy, you're somewhere here. I went off my screen.
Yes, sir. I'm in there.
Sandy's got a wonderful presentation, so I will turn it to Sandy and we'll start from there. Over to you, Sandy.
Thanks, George. For those who don't know me, my name is Sandy Landcraft. My call is N1FSK at the present time. And tonight's presentation is about amateur moonbounce. I've had a history in this, and Mike W1BNC, who's on here tonight, and George, a few years back were asking me if I'd like to do a presentation about EME, moonbounce, and I said I would, but I wasn't going to do it until I had some of my equipment built, tested, and some actual results. Is everybody hearing me okay tonight?
Yes, but we can't see you.
Yeah, you have to share your screen, Sandy.
Okay, we're ready to share screen. Okay. Share. Okay, there we go. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you fine.
You're okay, Sandy.
You could be a little louder.
Okay, let's see here. So tonight's talk is about EME. I call it Going Back to the Future because I have done this before under the call of WA1FSK. And I've spent the last 5 years, about 1 man year of actual hands-on time in the last 5 years, building a station to do this again. So I wanted to share the journey with you. I'm not going into any equations, or there will be technical stuff, but I'm not going into a, rigmarole with theory and all that. It's here's how you do it. It is sort of for medium beginners. I notice a lot of you tonight are very seasoned amateurs, so I'll tune this into your frequency, and here we go. There is embedded audio and videos in this. Most of them are you'll be able to hear, hopefully. Here we go. I have a picture of the moon from Chatham a couple of months ago that Amy, my XYL K1TIN, took. And while I show that, I wanted to just go through some of the history on what EME is and moonbounce. In 1946, the US Army Air Corps had a 10 megawatt station on 111 megahertz, and they were able to bounce a radar signal off the moon. And it all started in 1946. By 1953, W4AO and W3GKP with 1 kilowatt input, which was our limit at the time, was stacked rhombics, recorded the first amateur echoes between stations on 2 meters. Things went pretty slow because it was the path loss at 2 meters is 252 dB. At 1296, it's 20 dB higher, 272 dB. And completing a 440,000 mile round trip is almost technically impossible until Sam Harris, W1FZJ, at the Rhododendron Swamp Radio Club here in Massachusetts on 1296, connected with the IMAC radio group W6AG HB rather, and they had their first EME QSO on 1296. You can look it up on the web. There's a chronicle of the QSO, fascinating, because drift was a big problem, and you're doing sub-0 dB communications. So that's sort of the history. One of the rules of EME, both stations have to see the moon to enable this to happen. The moon becomes a passive repeater, and on most frequencies, about 7% of the RF energy that hits the moon is reflected. So it gives you an appreciation on how difficult this is. I'm not going to be reading bullets in the presentation tonight, but I will read this one because it really moved me. I am a writer and I have my own feelings about EME, but from Tim Merrick, K7XC, he said, I can't describe the feeling of hearing my own echoes for the first time, or my first EME QSO with 1 Yagi and 100 watts with Dave, W5UN. who made it seem so easy. Or the first time I heard signals with a new array of 4 Yagis. It's like being a novice again. Every day holds something new. When I did this as WA1FSK about 32 years ago, it was an overwhelming experience when I heard my first echoes. Some background on me. I've been into radio for 61 years off and on. I was licensed like Greg in 1965. I passed my novice and got the call N1FSK. To this day, I haven't been on teletype, but this year I hope to change that. Less than a year later, I upgraded to general and advanced licenses, and I got the WA1FSK call. I was gone for about 10, 12 years, came back several years back, and when the vanity call appeared, I got my novice call without the W on it. Oh, let me go back. This is my lovely XYL Amy K1TIN. When we were young, life was easy, things were easy to do. The picture shown here is Dave, W5UN, legendary on 2 meters EME. The array that's being shown is a little under, I think it's 896 elements. There's a little pickup truck in the lower left-hand corner that gives you an idea, and a full-size truck chassis under the far tower support, which gives you an idea of how big this thing is. Dave was my first QSO. We had similar stations except for the antenna. We both ran barefoot 251As into 80-watt amplifiers. For my first QSO, I was running 80 watts with 1/8 the size of the array Dave has. I had 4 very long Cushcraft long Yagis and an H-frame on a piece of Roan 45 in my backyard. By even today's standards, my quad array is really big. Let me put it into perspective. Brian isn't here, but my quad array was the size of Brian's house. Dave's array that you see here, W5UN, is the size of a neighborhood. That's how big things are. This changed my EME world. I'll tell you a quick story about going high power on 2 meters. I had an old flea market buddy named Eddie Trella. Eddie was a WA1, and he ran a flea market restoration business. And I worked in Newington, Connecticut, close to the league for a major corporation there. And one morning I got a call from Eddie, and the call went like this: "Hey kid, you better get down here right away because I have something in my basement you may be interested in, and bring cash." So it was a payday. And what I did is I went with another ham buddy of mine over to see Eddie in Meriden, Connecticut. And in his cellar, asking price $150, he had a already built W6PO iMac amp with a workable 8877 and a spare 8877 for the incredible price of $150. That changed my EME world. Mike, W1BNC, will probably tell you these days those tubes are $1,000 a piece. So it was affordable back then. So I increased my Cushcraft 4218s to 35-foot long, the K1FO mods, and it gave me an antenna that I could get echoes any time of the day on 144. Back then, we didn't have chat rooms. There wasn't really an internet. We didn't have social media. So how did we communicate? Well, we had written ledgers. iMac would publish lists of all sorts of pictures of guys' antennas and amps, and this is how we learned. You can see my stats, 4x18 elements, 1,000 watts at the antenna, and QRV, I'm ready to send. My phone started ringing off the hook. So we did this via phone calls, snail mail, and 20 meters on 14.345 once a week. So Dave was my first couple of contacts. I worked him several times with the 8877, and by then I was finding out that I was the only station in Connecticut on 2 meter EME, and my phone started going crazy. I got a call from Dan, HB9CRQ. We set up a sked, and Dan was my first DX station, and I gave the state of Connecticut for his worked all states to the country of Switzerland. I worked Dan several times. I want to explain what an initial contact is. You can see here I was his number 282. I think he was like my number 6 initial or something like that. Like on the repeater, you'll talk to each other many, many times, but the initial is the first time. It's the one that counts. And it's the one that your worked all states or worked all continents or DXC is based on. I was active for 2 years on 144. I had 69 initials. When I went QRT, I had probably all the hard states to get, including the faraway ones. I had Idaho, Montana. I think I still need Oregon and a couple ones down south. But with an 8877 and 23 dB gain, I could work into Virginia every night on terrestrial. So 31 years passed. Here's a model I built for my surgeon who saved my life with a cancer operation about 13 months ago of Schrodinger's cat. It's a physics paradox of the cat could be dead or alive. We don't know which because of quantum mechanics, but in my life, that's how I felt at the time having cancer. But this cat's a survivor thanks to my surgeon, and I made him that model. Some of you may recall I was building quite a few of these MCHF SDR rigs. And the reason I did it, I wanted to try Moonbounce as Sam Harris did it on 1296. The top pictures, one of my MCHFs built in a Landcraft cabinet with a little matching amp by Jim Valdez, WA1GPO. And underneath is a MCHF that I had built for me by Chuck, WD8BXS, with the lit buttons. It was really cool. What happened though, the rig is a phenomenal rig. It's as good as any of my Landcraft equipment. And the German design team that was going to be taking care of the software on this open source project wanted to do a 1296 rig. So I built it with hopes that that would happen, which it never did. So where I went next at a flea market, I was able to purchase a 60 watt Down East microwave transverter, which would take my MCHF from 10 meters to 1296. I did a number of mods on it. And what happened 20 minutes into my first moonrise, this is about 3 years ago, I went into thermal runaway. Although it's rated at 60 watts with the fan, which I had, it just wasn't up to handling continuous duty for digital modes. Terry, you're a W1TR. I hope you're still here because your cousin Ed, K1TR, told me a couple weeks, this may be the second long loop Yagi for 1296 to 76 elements. I thought it was the only one in the world because Directive Systems makes this on 2304 megahertz. It's about 12 feet long, 76 elements. This one, thanks to Tom, N1TQ, who gave me the start on this, and some new elements from Directive Systems, is over 20 feet long. I think the difference of this particular station is I'm probably the second person in the world who's ever tried this and attempted this from an indoor antenna. There's one guy in Europe that did it with a 5-foot W2 IMU horn stuck out his porch window. But this is a huge antenna. And I'll get into it a little bit later how it works. So there I am with a blown amplifier, and I needed to get something really that would hold up under continuous duty. I always wanted a Ten-Tech Titan. I found a front panel on eBay for $20 and got a heatsink for 1 kilowatt. And I started writing to Jim Klitzing, W6PQL, who makes wonderful amps, because I wanted to build a low power version of what he produces. So a year in the making, let me just see if I can move this. Okay. A year in the making, I ended up with some help shearing my aluminum. I'll get that into later because I had just completed my surgery for cancer. I wasn't able to sit down for a couple of months, let alone work a hacksaw. I love homebrew. The upper left picture shows the huge heat sink, the 2 small Mitsubishi gain blocks, which are rated at 36 watts output. We're pushing them at anywhere from 60 to 80 watts. There's a Rogers combiner, the little green board to the right, upper right. Underneath it is a programmable sequencer, which does relay and station control. and a couple of French radio relays with Down East Microwave pulse boards that lets the 28 volts relays run on 12 volts. So here's what it sounds like on my first test, although Greg, WA1JXR, and Mike, W1BNC, said, bring it on up, we'll help you test it. I got it going myself. I don't know if you can, oh, let me see if I can, there we go. She's putting out about 50 watts for a 1/4 kilowatt input. That's the efficiency of these sets. So now it gave me a workable amplifier and antenna. I needed to choose an IF strip that would work. I've tried many ones from the MCHF, an IC7300 you see in the upper left. I built a brand new Landcraft 8-year-old new in the box from K1NR. Ordered the 2-meter transverter from Landcraft and found out it just wasn't up to it, like the IC9700, which has a tendency to drift on 23 centimeters. The KX3 was just not doing it. Mike, W1BNC, had a chat and said, Sandy, maybe you're expecting too much out of that little rig. So I ended up getting a K310, and believe me, I'm really happy with it. The lower right-hand picture shows my 1296 station set up for terrestrial work. And normally on sideband, I run about 80 watts out, about 320 watts input. Nothing I have practically is stock. You can see the rack handles I made for the Landcraft K3. So then it became a question of stability. I've tried a number of different transverter schemes with field tests to find something that would give me the 1 to 2 hertz stability I needed on 1296. I won't go into details. The center picture with the nice blue clouds, Mike, W1BNC, Herb, KC1GIB were there with me that day on Wachusett Mountain at the summit, testing a 20 watt version, which was my backup rig. But I ended up with a 28 to 2 meter transverter driving an SG Labs 1296 transverter, puts out about 2 watts. About 1 watt through an attenuator feeds my W6 PQL amp to full power. And this is what JT65, I'm sorry, Q65 Charlie sounds like. Digital key down at about 60 watts out. So this is my indoor antenna setup. It is a fiberglass surveyor's tripod that lets RF pass through. You can see the upper right, the antenna is running from the kitchen through the living room. I have an inclinometer homebrew on it to read elevation. The lower left-hand picture shows a very simple Azel mount that I have. And the final picture on the lower right shows moonrise at Worcester at about 1 degree elevation with 10 feet of the antenna sticking out. How do we aim this? Simple, backpack and compass. So I needed a heavy lifter. The way it works with QRP stations like my own, you need somebody with a lot of gain and a lot of capture area and a lot of power at the other end. I called in an old marker from my friend Dan, HB9CRQ, who runs the DX club station HB9Q in Switzerland. And he responded via email and said, Sandy, I would love to schedule you. So we started it. Let me just spend a little minute about Dan's station, because this is a world-class setup. The white dish is 10 meters in diameter, roughly 33 feet in diameter. Below it is a cabinet with 1 kW at the feed point. It's remoted into the little gray building you see in the back, which is a 2-story building. Below he has a lab and a fab shop, and upstairs is the operating station. This particular dish works 1296 megahertz to 10 gigahertz on all microwave EME bands. It is a world-class station. I figured if he can hear me, I'm golden. The upper right shows Dan with a small dish, because these guys go all over the world, activating rare countries and rare areas for those who want to work microwave and 144 and 50 megahertz EME. The large fab, it has a cloth on it, hardware cloth dish. is 45 feet in diameter, which he uses for 2 meters and 432. You'll see an Landcraft K3. This is a dedicated 1296 station at KB9, HB9Q. So it's showtime, everybody. Like the old days, since I have a very limited azimuth and elevation constraint out an apartment window, I ran printouts showing me low noise places where I had access to the moon. I plugged in a Peter G3 LTF to give me a window for Europe, and it looked like I was good to go for the ARRL EME 1296 contest, which was last month. I'll spend a little bit of time on the upper right photo, which shows WSJT, which some of you may use for FT8 on the low bands. But the tricky thing about 1296 is Doppler. There's 6 different ways to do Doppler, and you have to have the right one selected. Setting up WSJTX for microwave 1296 is really difficult. I've done a few years on FT8, so I'm comfortable with the program, but the Doppler was something new to me. On 2 meters, Doppler is only 300 hertz. Here, it can be on Moonrise, put the station outside the bandpass of your receiver, which is a problem. But you'll see a tricky little program by ARRL guy in Maine, KA1GT, Bob Atkins, which completely automates Doppler. You can see I have my, both Dan in Switzerland and I have selected constant frequency on the moon. And to the hertz, it will adjust my K3 to whatever frequency I need and keep me locked in so we can find each other. The waterfall display was recorded by Bill, W1PA up in Holden, and shows me transmitting at the beginning of my sequence. To the left, you can see the sync trace, and then the digital information to the right. And at that point, I was still calling Dan. You can see Moonrise in Worcester with my Loop Yagi 76 elements pointed right at the moon. So here's what things look like during the QSO. I had my amplifier, my transverter skid, and a DB6NT 0.7 dB noise figure preamp right under the antenna, 5 feet of 6/10 inch Andrews Heliax. And you may not be able to hear this, but here's the amp, the 1/4 kilowatt input and 60 watts out on Q65C mode, which is a new mode, by the way. So it's not FT8, fellas, guys and girls. This is what FT8 looks like on the low bands. And to the right is HB9Q, a superstation. Look how weak the signal is, copyable. I was on for 4 days before hooking up with Dan, a day before our schedule, and I did not decode anybody. What I found was a Windows problem. I restarted my laptop, and voila, I got an instant decode at -27. Weak, but hey, I'm QRP, I'll take it. You can see the sequence he sent to me, my signal. I sent back Rogers. I was receiving him at -14, which is about what could be expected. So I know my station's working. Dan has one of the several chat facilities in the world where you're not allowed to talk about signals while you're doing it or, hey, I got you. But he sent me a congratulations after the QSL was done. The QSO was done. My signals went down to -24, which is pretty darn good for a 60-watt station with an indoor antenna. The next day, the ARRL contest began, and I was making a lot of changes to my receiver and tweaking things. Even through the rain, I was able to do a decode on Dan's station, calling an old buddy of mine, Jay Buscemi, down in Staten Island, NY2NY. So you can see the decodes in the bottom. Jay wasn't able to complete the QSO, though he had some transmitter problems. I probably called 4 to 5 different high power stations in Europe and just couldn't get any decodes. So I chalked it up to a valid QSO the day before. The final courtesy of the contact is a paper QSL card on EME. Us Moonbouncers love to get paper QSL cards. Not so happy about EQSL and Log of the World, but holding a QSL card in your hand is really something. Dan's is a a 4-page card. I think it's 3.5 by 5.5 inches. My QSL is, because I'm a compulsive home brewer, is handmade just for the occasion, but I printed up a bunch of them. We should be QRV in the spring of this year, running portable. I know the station will work a lot better outside than it does inside. I guess the bottom line on this, it takes patience. In this, in my instance here, it took me 5 years of home brewing, test, design, rebuilding, trying something different. I'm a big fan now of the Landcraft K3. It just works really well. All the rigs were okay. My IC 7300 was pretty good, but I was a little nervous of running a 100-watt rig into microwave equipment that I had spent years building, and I didn't want to blow it up, so I went with a QRP rig. But stations, big super stations like Dan's HB9Q make it possible for small stations like me to accomplish this. I have well over a man-year of effort into this. So at that point, are there any questions?
I don't have any questions, but I know the Egyptians worship the cats.
Yeah, that's why I put that in there for a little humor. Can everybody see me now that we're back on live?
You're still sharing your
Okay, let me
screen.
unshare and then I'll go back to a share here in a second. How's this? This is a beautiful QSL card. I sent them a return right before Christmas. It was a big thrill to get this.
You're still
Consider-
sharing your screen, Sandy.
Just to say, we missed you on the ARRL VHF contest. I made 4 1296 contacts.
Let me how do I?
Hey, Selena, do you want to stop the video at this point?
Yeah, just
The video